Fuck. How's it going, everybody? We are back for another video. In the last video, we finished up with the cooling system. We got a new radiator, new hoses, new thermostat, pretty much everything for the cooling system. We got it bled, and the car is now running. We also had to swap the clutch around, but it moves, it runs. Everything is going good so far. And if you guys aren't familiar with this build, we are currently building an E36 turbo. We are in the final stages of it now, but if you guys are curious, I have a playlist down in the description. You guys can check out all the previous videos and catch up with us. But today's video is on the oil cooling system. Currently there is no oil cooling system, so that's what we're going to fix today. I have a new oil cooler here. This is just a aftermarket Amazon oil cooler. I think it's Evil Energy, something like that. Just the basic stuff from Amazon. We also have new oil lines that we'll be installing. We're gonna have to figure out how to mount the oil cooler, and we also have a new oil temperature sensor that we're gonna install and figure out how exactly we're gonna do that. But yeah, let me show you guys all the parts real quick, and then we can go ahead and just get started. Alright, so first things first, we have the AN line. This is PTFE line, AN10. This is the same stuff that we use on the oil return for the turbo. We also have two new fittings, or four new fittings I guess, two 90s and two straight fittings. I already went ahead and measured the lines here, and we should have enough material to get us by. So we'll just be reusing this stuff, and hopefully it works great. We also have the oil cooler itself. Like I was saying, this is Evil Energy's universal. I believe it's a 10-row oil cooler. Hopefully it's big enough. We also have an oil temperature gauge. This is going to be most likely the only mechanical gauge that we actually have, or analog gauge. Everything else we can have on the tablet, but for this one, for some reason, Tuner Studios makes it difficult for Speeduinos to run oil temperature, so we'll be doing it with an actual gauge. So I have to figure out how exactly we're going to get it mounted in the car, but that is part of the list here of items. We also have the adapter that we'll be using for the oil filter. This will go on top. This is the new hat for it. It's by Rally Road. It's very popular. A lot of people use this. It has two ports on the side here. We also have the filter that comes for it. I believe it's off an E36 330. I was just reading the instructions because it came with it, so I didn't know if it was the same or not, but it's actually for an E46. There's many different ways of doing this build, installing an oil cooler. If you look online, if you look on YouTube, everybody has their own ways of doing it. Some people like to even change out the whole housing for the oil filter with a Euro style, but this was kind of the way that I went with. For the money, this was kind of the way to go, and I think it'll work out just fine. So with that being said, the first thing we have to tackle is mounting the oil cooler itself. I was thinking about it for a couple of days, how exactly we're going to do it. Some people like to hang it off the top here. They'll get some brackets and they'll hang it up upside down, and they'll bolt it up top. But I think the way we're going to do it for our setup is using these blocks. So I just went ahead and made these real quick. These are just some aluminum blocks that I went ahead and measured out and drilled and tapped some holes. They're M6 holes. They should fit with the oil cooler exactly. I think this way it should fit. So the plan is we're going to go ahead and weld these blocks onto the intercooler itself, just like that. We'll get these mounted up. We'll also get rid of these bungs because we don't need them. And then we'll come in with the oil cooler. A big part of this is kind of the planning process. That's what takes the longest, honestly. At least for me, because I'm a little slow. So I really have to think through what I'm going to do, since this is my first time installing an oil cooler. But this is kind of what it's going to look like. These blocks will get welded to the intercooler itself on both sides, and the lines will run off the top. That's what the 90s are for. They'll go off the side. They'll sneak up right in between that bracket and the radiator, and they'll come around and meet up with the new adapter plate. So that's kind of the plan. So we're gonna go ahead and pull the intercooler now, and we'll start with the welding of these new adapter blocks, and we'll also cut these guys out. So let's go ahead and get the intercooler out, and let's start doing some fabricating. All right, the intercooler is out. The top mounts are now removed, so we now have the space to mount the oil cooler on top, and I also went ahead and marked everything up. So let's grab the intercooler, let's place it down. I'll line it up in a bit, but that's pretty much what it's going to look like. It'll get bolted down. So I'm going to line this up, give it a couple tacks, remove the cooler itself, and weld out the mounts. Alright, so the mounts are now welded on, albeit with a little bit of tungsten added into there. Took a little minute. That was the best pass right there. But they're welded on and they're in place. I didn't weld the backside just because that gap is so small. I was afraid I'd melt into the intercooler itself. Right there. I was afraid I'd melt into that. But I'm sure this will hold just fine. So now that we got this welded on, we got the mounts welded on, we can go ahead and install the intercooler, get it back in the car, and we can start figuring out how we're going to route the lines. So let's get this back in the car. Alright, so now that we have the intercooler installed back again in the car, I'm just mounting up the oil cooler, just trying to figure out how we're going to route the lines. As you can see, there's just about enough space for those angled AN fittings to fit in there. But the problem is, if we look in between the radiator and this piece right there, there's not a lot of space. And if I give you another shot, right now I have the radiator kind of just hanging out. Looks like there's enough space right there, but once everything gets tightened down, I can't move it right now, but once this is more forward where it's supposed to be, there's almost just enough room to squeeze a line through, but not quite. So I already went ahead and tried it, and it just quite doesn't fit. So what I'm going to have to do is cut out a little slot in there. I know you can't see because it's not focusing right, but I'm about to cut in a little slot to get the oil lines to fit properly. And to do that, we have this electric body saw. It's a really small blade, so hopefully I'll be able to get in there and cut out a little small notch. That way we can fit the lines through and get this to fit. Oh shit. Fuck. Let's see if we got another blade. Fix it. Try it again. Alright, so we now have the clearance for the lines. It's kind of hard to see exactly, but if I zoom in, you can see that I put a piece of rubber just to kind of protect the line a bit. It's all blurry now. Okay, now you can see it. Now it's blurry again. Okay, so the line moves freely, even with the radiator all the way to the front. There's still enough clearance there to get the lines through. So that was a success. Next step, before we make the lines, is going to be mounting the new cap for the oil filter. Let's get the new cap on. We can get it installed, get the new filter on, and we can start working with the lines. Alright, so I didn't drain the oil before doing this, so let's see if we can get this done without having to, since I just put some new oil in. Alright, do this line real quick, let's push it off somewhere. Let's get this cap off. Oh boy. Come on, no oil, no oil. We got oil. Oh boy. I think. Let's get this filter off. Oh, there's actually not that much oil in there. Just a little bit. Still really doable. Alright, first thing is this bottom piece. This is for, I believe, adapting the new filter onto. And I believe this just sits like that. Next goes the new filter. Again, this is for E36. Now goes on the new cap. It's pretty simple. This is a pretty simple install. Pretty easy. Got the new O-ring on there. Sure it's snug. Just drops in like that. And lastly, goes on the bolts. The new washer. I'll tighten this by hand. I don't think it's going to take much to get it sealed. And we're just going to have to wait to figure out how to align this thing. There we go. I might have to take this back off, or at least loosen it, just so I can move it a bit to get the lines screwed in, because there's not that much space right here. But now it's on. So let's get to cutting the new lines, and we'll get the lines measured, fitted, and yeah, we'll get them installed. Alright, so these PTFE lines are pretty simple to work, so I'll just give you a quick summary of how to do it. I think I might have explained this in a video prior. Alright, so this is what it looks like. This is the material on the inside, and here's the stainless braiding. It's just a two-part thing, and here is the fitting. It's a bit different than these standard AN lines, the rubber ones, whatever material they are. It's got a little piece in here. I forgot all the verbiage for it, but this is a 3-piece. and this is a 2-piece. This kind of came with the whole kit. You want to just kind of push it in there, just like so. Just kind of poke it back out since the rubber, or since the material is pretty flexible. It kind of just makes it straight again from when you cut it. What you do is you put this small collet inside until it bottoms out, something like that. But you want to make sure it's all the way in there. And then once that's in, then actually you put this in first, I forgot. You would put this in, then you'd put this inside, you press it all the way in until it's flat up against it, and then this comes up and you just kind of tighten it back up and it becomes one part. And to make the process easier, I just use these. These are, I forgot the company, I believe it's Vibrant. They're like vice jaw attachments. They're made out of aluminum, so it helps to kind of clamp everything without marring up the aluminum from the AN lines, from the fittings. And you also use one of these. This is just an adjustable wrench that's made specifically for AN lines. And yeah, because it's a little bigger than, since these are AN10, you would use an AN10 to wrench these together to close them up. But for the actual fitting itself, for this part, for tightening it up, we're tightening this up to this. It's a little bigger than an AN10, so I just use an adjustable and just fit it in there and tighten it up. Pretty simple. Okay, so now that the AN lines are made up, we can start installing them. I already started installing one. It's to kind of figure out how to do it, since it's going to be kind of a game of Tetris. Just trying to fit one piece in and then probably having to loosen this up, move this, adjust it. I'm just trying to get it all to fit. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we'll be back once it's all done. Alright, so it's now installed. Got it all set up, got the lines done, got the cap done, and the cooler is not properly mounted and the lines are tightened up. So I did go ahead and already squirt some oil in through the line. Hopefully it was enough to get it filled up, but if it's not, what I'm planning on doing is just kind of disconnecting the fuel pump and giving it a quick startup, and hopefully let the oil pressure build a bit, or at least get the oil to run through the engine, and then I'll just check it, and if we need to fill it a bit more, we will. But everything is now fully installed and the oil cooler is in. So last part of this is to figure out how we're going to get the oil pressure sensor fit up and installed. So let's start tackling that problem. Alright, so for tackling the gauge, like I was saying, I was still trying to figure out how to do it, but I'm pretty sure I came up with a good way of doing it. Let me go ahead and show you guys. So the problem was, since I already have this here, this is for the tablet itself, the only solution was to replace the cubby here. If you look online, they have little inserts that are like for gauge pods that replace this cubby. But the problem is, since I put the e-brake in, since I installed it, this is pretty loose. Like, it moves around quite a bit. So I didn't feel comfortable replacing that, and I kind of like that it's there. It's pretty handy. So instead, I was just looking around trying to find something, and I found a 3D printed design that you could purchase and print up for this unit. I forgot what it's called. I believe it's called the OBC unit. It's hard to tell in the lighting, but this unit here, I was realizing, you know what, I don't even need it, so why don't I just get rid of it and put the gauges there? So that's kind of what I'm thinking of doing. So this just comes out like that. There goes the OBC. Instead, I'm going to be installing this. So this, I already went ahead and 3D printed it. If anybody's curious, it's made out of ABA material, which is like ABS, just a little different. But this will work just fine. if I go ahead and pop it in place, I won't put it in all the way just because it might be a bit of a pain to get out, but it's actually a pretty snug fit. As you can see, I'm having difficulty getting it in right now. It's hard to tell, but that is how that's going to go in. And just so you can see it better, that's how it's going to go in. And then I'll have one gauge that'll go in like this. You know, just pressed in a little more, look a little nicer. And that way we'll have the gauge in a good spot to view, and we'll also have the small cubby there. We'll get to keep it. So this is kind of the best way that I found to do it. It took quite a bit to figure this out, but I'm glad somebody already made a template to use for a 3D print. So it came in clutch, and this is what it's going to be. These two ports here, I'm not going to end up using them, at least not right now at least. So what I'm thinking of doing is probably just placing like a sticker over it or something just to cover it up. But yeah, so now that I have this figured out and I already have the mount made, the next step is figuring out how to wire the gauge up. I was already looking at the instructions, and it doesn't seem too complicated. The only hard part is going to be running the wire that connects to the sensor itself. So for the sensor, I have it right here. This is the one that came with the gauge. It's just a 2-wire sensor. So what I'm planning on doing is, when I originally installed the block in the back there, that block in the back there, it's from a rally road. It's made for adapting sensors onto the oil filter housing in the back. Instead of using this, the cap here that has that extra port, I actually have an oil pressure sensor already installed in the back there. But that was kind of an experiment to see if I could get it to connect with the ECU, and it doesn't. At least I can't figure out how to make it work. So what I'm thinking of doing is actually just getting rid of that one. Here, let's see if you can see it. There you go. Oh. So what I'm thinking of doing is getting rid of that one in the back there, and running the new one in, installing it. Luckily, the gauge came with an adapter, the exact same one that I need. I'll probably just replace the crush washer with the copper one, just because I prefer the copper ones. But replace that sensor, run the wire all the way through, most likely this way, run it back, and then somehow get it inside the dash, and then back into the right behind the cluster here, where it will hook up to the gauge, hopefully. So kind of have it figured out, finally have a plan for how to tackle this problem. So the next step is just to start, I guess, just running the wires through. So I'll be explaining how I'm going to wire it up, but first I'm just going to run the wire through. I'm not going to, you know, show you guys exactly how to do it, since it's going to be kind of a pain to figure out myself. So cut to future me where the wire is ran through. And we're back. The line is now routed. I ended up routing it through the back here. There's a little port down there behind the carpet. There's a port where some of the battery lines run through. I just kind of routed it through that same hole. Might have punctured it a bit and ripped it open, but it's routed. And it's all through the engine and back through there. And I routed it through this plastic. It's behind there and back up, and now it is here. So this is the line from the sensor itself. So we now have this done, and this already comes with a connector. So now that that's done, the second part of it is powering the gauge itself. And to do that, we're going to go ahead and use this connector. This is the connector that connected to the OBS unit. That's kind of my plan for now. I'm going to figure out which is 12 volt powered all the time, which is 12 volt powered with the ignition on and the proper ground for it. Since we don't need this, we can just go ahead and cut them and splice them into the harness for the gauge itself. So the first thing is to figure out what is 12 volts all the time, constant. So to do that, I have my multimeter here, and I have it grounded to the e-brake itself, and it actually works pretty good. Let me show you. Alright, so as I was testing it, I found that the first pin here is getting 12 volts with the key off and the car off. So that means this right here, that last pin, is constant power. So we have that one. It's most likely the red one. We're still gonna have to look through them. Could just tap straight into this. Just poke this in there. But just so you guys could see. And the next one is to figure out which is 12 volt switch power. And I already kind of figured it out. I believe it's pin 5, which is this one. So as you can see, this is on pin 5 and we're at 0 volts. But once I turn on the key, we look over and it's at 12 volts. So that is our switch power, which, taking a look in there, I was able to figure out it's the purple and white wire, which seems to be this one. We'll test it again once the wires are out. And the final one is just a ground, which most likely is the brown wire. So once we have those 3 wires, we'll have what we need. So next I'm going to go ahead, cut the wires and crimp them onto a connector, which will be a quick disconnect. That way we'll be able to remove the gauge when we need to. So let me go ahead and show you guys. Alright, I'm going to use this tool here to tap into the wires, figure out which colors are what. This is just a little attachment that comes with these probes and just kind of helps to tap into these lines here. Alright, there we go. The red and orange wire, the red and yellow one, that one is constant power, so we got that one. Alright, and yep, the purple and white one definitely is our power wire when the key is on, so that's our ignition on. Let's switch over to ohms. Alright, yep, and our brown wire here we'll use as a ground. So we now have 3 wires. We got the red and yellow, we got the purple and white, and we got the brown. So I'm gonna go ahead and disconnect the battery first. I'm gonna cut the wires, and I'm gonna go ahead and crimp in the quick disconnects. This is my crimping tool, and these are the quick disconnects. We now have 3 crimped and quick connect wires here, and just so you can see, this is the male side, this is the female side. They should just pop right in this way, and it connects. Gotta push it a little further, but you get the point. Alright, bam. And here are the male connectors. I already have them wired up. I got red, white, and black. We got power, ground, and this one's for switch power. So now that we have this already, I also have the gauge mounted up. I just screwed it in just a little snug. I did have to cut this a bit to get it to fit, but it fits. Everything is looking good. So let's hook it up, connect it, and see if it works. Sick! It works! It works! Dope! So we got it working. We got the wiring right. Everything went pretty good. The plastic piece here, it's not a perfect fit. I might still fiddle with it a bit more. It's hard to tell from the camera, but it's not exactly in place. But I mean, it's snug, it's on there. It's not really going to want to go anywhere. The gauge works when I turn it on. When I turn it off, what do you know? It turns off. Oh, it's so cool. One more time. What does this do? I'm about to figure out what that button does. Alright, cool though. We now have a working oil temp gauge. Oh, that's so cool. It's not reading properly though, so let's turn the car on and see if it'll work right then. Alright, so it's the next day and I got like 30 minutes to kill before I go to work, so let's start the car up and see if everything's working like it should. The first thing we're going to do before I start it real quick is just kind of prime the oiling system. I'm going to disconnect the fuel pump and just crank it for a couple of seconds, then we can start it up and just check everything over. Probably check the oil level too. Chilling. All right, we got oil, so let's start it up. So I was actually just being dumb. I didn't notice, but the gauge starts at 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So you kind of have to warm the car up for a while. Once it gets up to operating temperature or close to it, then you can actually see some results. Right now it's at 117 degrees, 118. So it's actually moving. Cool. I actually like this gauge too. I like the color. Green and red, it's pretty sick. All right. We have a working gauge. Sweet. So we now have a completed oil cooler, including the mounts and the lines and all the small parts for it. And we also have a oil temperature gauge. So now when we're at the track or just driving around or what, we can figure out if the oil is getting too hot or what. We'll be able to monitor it and figure out what the deal is with that. One thing I do want to add, before we got started with all this stuff, I did go ahead and replace the clutch slave cylinder as well as a line for it. When I took it out and we did the whole transmission swap stuff, I noticed that the slave cylinder was leaking out of the seals, so I thought, you know, we got to get this done at some point. But it wasn't such a big job that I needed a whole video for it. It was pretty small, so I just got a quick clip of it. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that in there. We also got that done as well on the side. That was a whole beast on its own. I'll tell you what, it ended up taking me multiple days because the nuts for the lines ended up getting stripped and they were super corroded and it was just a mess. It was a mess trying to get it all off. That's why I ended up replacing the line because it was a disaster. But I ended up bleeding the clutch system, which is pretty simple. And we got the new slave cylinder in. The one thing I still might do is a master cylinder, but we'll see where to go with that. And we'll see where to go with the car. So right now, I'm probably going to take this next week to just kind of figure out what we're going to do with it. I also have a bunch of extra eBay parts too, so I'll probably start selling some of those things and just try to rack up a bit more money before I decide. Are we going to go possibly get the E36 dyno? Are we going to take it to the track right away? I do want to take it to the track, but at the same time, got to figure out, maybe there's something I missed. So I know that we do still need an alignment. I need to fix some other stuff on the side, like with the truck and the trailer. There's a couple things that I want to do to it. We got a fair bit amount of stuff done today. I'm happy with it. Everything came out really good, and I'm just more and more excited to want to drive the car and start drifting it. And more nervous because of everything we've done to it. Yeah, so I guess we'll see where to go with that. But enough, I'm just rambling at this point, enough of this. So thank you guys for watching, and until next time, take care.